welcome to iCoding Club. My name is Praveen, and today we are talking about the brand new addition in React, in the React 16 version, that is the context API. Now, this is the second part of the video, second part of the demo, and in the first part, what we have covered that how to display a to-do list. In the last application, in the last video, we managed to complete this much, showing the list of to-dos. Basically, these are coming from the React context. We completed the basic connection or basic flow, like how to read data from the context. In this demo, in this particular video, the focus is that how we can mutate the context, how we can add new data into context, and then the whole application, how we make whole application bit reactive to that data. Whenever you update something in context, the whole application should know about that updation and should react to that and update themselves. So let's move further. But before we go there in the input part, I just want to clean up our code a little bit. Now, it is not necessary, but few of us, like me, they try to decouple the component part from the context or the data part. Basically, the component should only be talking to the state and the props, and as much possible, we should make it like data agnostic, like from where the data is coming. To do that, there is a simple pattern evolved. Definitely, there are other patterns also possible. But what I'm going to do is just going to create a high order component which will wrap the to-do list, and that high order component going to pass the context as a props, going to pass the context data, in this particular case to-dos, as a prop to the component. To do that is the idea is just to kind of wrap it under a high order component. In this case, I'm just going to create a simple function component. Now just going to say default, and I'm just going to create a function component. Basically, this is a function, and we are exposing it as a default, and that make it the function component. Now the function component just going to get a props by default, nothing related to context here. But now what we're going to do here is that we're going to take this whole code, uh, this the whole part into this particular high order component. Basically, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take the whole written part and just copy paste it here. Definitely, we don't need this thing, and I'm going to just take this to-do list, put it here, and just going to pass to-dos as props. Simple as that. Right now, because to-do list is accepting to-dos as a props, it doesn't need to take or ask context for that data. What we can do, in place of having the function, I can just kind of take this whole return and just have it here, and the to-dos, in place of getting from context, I can just get from the props to-dos, and just use this dot props and just take it out to-dos from it, right? And this props, what I can do, I can just put it as a spread notation. Using spread notation, I can pass it, so that if you're getting something from parent, should also go back or get passed to the to-do list. Now let's just refresh the application. Now, after this part, after this code, little bit of code refactoring, what we're going to do, we're just going to style our component a little bit. In the last video, we have added a style sheet, but we are not using it much. What we're going to do now is just utilize few of the classes what we have here. That is, the first one is to do app. Basically, just going to have a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of styling in our component. So the top level, we can add this particular class. I can just simply just have a div class name equal to do app, and just div little bit of refactoring, and you can see that component already, the browser already refreshed itself, and we can see that little bit of styling is there. The next part is to add an input and interact with context. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new component. We're going to call it to do input.js, and just let's include it for now. What we can do is import to do input from to do input, and just have this one. Now in this point, I just also want to highlight it in the typical React application, you must see, or the experienced developer must be expecting some kind of props mapping here. You must be getting the to-dos from somewhere and passing to the child. But thanks to React context, this all are happening without any props mapping. And that's basically the objective of context. So let's move to-do input and let's try to build our application. Let's just save it and basic stuff first. React from React, and let's create a class to do input and extend it from React dot component. And basically what we're going to do now is, first we're not going to introduce anything related to the React context here. First it will be a simple control component which will just taking the input from a form and just kind of doing a simple console log, as simple as that. So let's export default to do input, and we are good here. Now just have a render. Now our need is input, so I can just have a return and create an input. And this input can have, first I can put a class name just for styling. I can pick the class which I already have here, that is to the input. It will just make it look better. You can totally skip this step. I can just have a name for this input as to do, and let's have a value equal to do. Now this to do we have to get from the state. So I can just create a constructor props super pass to props to the parent and just initialize state as to do, right? Basically we can also skip the whole creation of constructor. This state could also be a part of the class, but I'm just skipping that pattern for now. But yeah, the starter kit what we have also support class properties, so it's no problem adding there also. But I just like this constructive way of adding or initializing the state. Now we're done with it. What we have to do is we have to make this our component a control component, a little bit more placeholder. Just let's have add to do, and on change I can just call a method. Now let's call it handle change to capture the input. Now handle change, if you are want to use a class property which I'm going to use, right, we can have a simple arrow function based handler, or otherwise there is always possibilities to initialize in the in constructor and bind with this, right? So just typical controller component, React control component concept. So I'm not going to cover that much in detail. So let's move further. So in handle change, we're going to collect the event. From the event, I can actually pull the value equal to event dot target. Once we have that, what we can do, just we can set the state and just set the value of to do as this value, and this to do I can actually get it here, to do equal to this dot state. Nothing special, simple controlled component, simple form. Okay, it's a bit of typo, so that is done. Now I believe this is fine. I can just go in browser just to see what is happening. So this is fine. What I want to do next is I want, whenever I press enter, I want this particular to do of whatever I'm adding here should go and log into console. That's my intention. Now there are different methods to do that. You can listen for enter event, but a pretty simple way is just to wrap everything under a form and just have on submit, right? And just we can say this dot add to do, and there we can have our logic. Let's close the form here. Basically what it does, the way form work is like in any input, if you press enter, it just submit the form. So just default behavior of form. I can again go for arrow function based handler. And the first thing I have to do is I have to disable the default behavior of form submit. So I can just say prevent default. That will just going to prevent the default behavior. We also have to, it's a good idea just to stop propagation also, because we are just not going to use it anywhere in the parent. So just a propagation, right? Just now it will just kind of block the for submission of form. I can just, at this point I can just simply log the value what we have in state. Basically every time you change something into input, that data goes into state. So I just don't have to listen from the event and pass the input and just get the value. That will be wrong. I mean, this we can just simply just use React state to just display that data. So to do, right? And I can just, once I capture the to do, I can clear the input for next to do. So I can just kind of reset it to the empty string. Let's see how much we can have by now. So it's refreshing. So if I just add a test to do, you can see that test to do is coming and the form is also getting clear. One small problem here is that we're getting this autocomplete. So just get rid of that also. I mean, just annoying me. So for that, we can just have a autocomplete uh, attribute, and just we can say that off. We don't want any suggestion from the browser, which could be good on other situation, but no, not in this case. So you can see that we are not getting any suggestion from browser now. Let's move further and try to add the context part into our application. Basically what we want to do is, once you click on add to do, I want to update context for new to do. That's all we want to do. What we can do is like we can just follow the pattern which we set up here in the to-do list. I can just copy this higher order function, come here into do app and place a exporting to do input. I can just take it and put it here. Now to update the context, what we have to do, we have to get something from context, which we definitely don't have right now, something like add to do. So if I just have here, oops, sorry, that was not needed, right? So if we have add to do method in the context, that will be passed to the to do input component, and that can be accessed here as this dot props dot add to do, and we can just say that this is our to do. This we can leave for now. Now our next job is to include this add to do method into our context. So I can just go back to our context component from where we started our journey, and what I can do, I can just have a method add to do, and what we're going to get as argument, that will be the newly created to do. And what I can do is, yeah, by this time I just kind of cut the console log statement from here, okay, and just put it here. To do in context, and if everything is working fine, our whole linkage is there, then this should be get printed. Let me just save to do input also. Okay, there is a error, to do consumer not defined. Okay, we forgot to include into our to do input. Here it is. We were getting the our okay, we were not getting a lint error here, but yeah. So what we can do is to the consumer import from context to the context. Now this will solve our error. So if I just come back to the browser, and this all are fine. Now if I just add test, okay, add to do is not function. Okay, this props dot add to do is not a function. Okay, where things are went wrong. So we are having context, from context add to do's is there. Okay, so we pull the data, but we didn't initialize in context. So basically we have add to do, but yeah, we have to put this add to do here in context. This dot add to do, right? Basically what we have here, that will be passed as the context. So if you're pulling the add to do from the context, it should be the part of this object. Let's refresh. And as expected, it is working fine. To do in context test. Now our job is that take this to do, update the state of the application, and then pass it back to the provider. Right. So let's start working on it. What we can do is we can use, because we are going to use the previous state data to, in the previous state we're going to add one more to do. We can use the function version of such state. Let's get the previous state here. And from the previous state, what I can do is I can just fetch the to-dos, which should be there. And what I can do is like, let's create a new to-do, new to-do, and yeah, ID. I can just copy what we have here, something like this. I can just copy the whole thing. this to do is the value of or description of new to do. So this is basically we are creating the new to do object. Now our next job is just to append into the existing to do and just pass create a new array out of it. Remember, we are trying to create a new array, which is the best practice to make keep everything pure, right? So in place of modifying the existing array or doing a push, what we are going to do is we're going to create a new to-dos, and just you're going to use the array destructuring existing to-dos, and just we're going to append one new to-do into the existing array. So basically what we're doing, we're fetching the existing to-dos, creating a new to-do, and appending or creating a new array by just using array destructuring. It will just take the whole to all the to-dos we have, plus it will append one new to-do, and we're just going to create a new to-do object, a new to-do array. Now next job is just to pass it as a return. So we're just going to say return whatever we pass, that will be the considered as the new state. So I'm just going to say to-dos, and the new to-dos array, the now on to-do array should be this new to-dos array. So that's complete our whole add to-do function. If I just refresh right now, basically what when say add to-do get get called, we create a new to-do, we will update everything, and we will set into state. That in result going to trigger the render method. In the render method, we are just getting fetching the to-dos from the state, which is nothing but the one we need newly created, and that should complete the whole cycle. And once we have this data into context and pass it to the provider, all the consumer going to get this new copy of to-dos. So let's see what's going on. So test to do. Awesome. So our application is working fine. I can just put a new one, and this whole thing is working fine. Now the last part of this whole application is to create a final counter component, and that's what I'm going to cover into the third part of the of this demo. So see you there in the next video.